So yeah, we are live again. Did you enjoy the countdown, Shantin?
I'm very happy to hear it again.
I'm glad. I'm glad I did it just for you.
Thank you
So
very much.
tonight we are retaking on the composition process. This time it will be me discussing my composition process. It's the composition process part 3. Juan's composition process. So give me a second while I share the live on the Forgotten Composers page. Yes, here.
Yeah.
And we should start. How can I describe the composition process for me? It would be like, I would say that it is very, very eclectic. Megan is always talking about how if you want to change how the way you use you of your pieces, how they sound, and all of that, you must change the process, right? Well, for me, I always want to create pieces that sound very, very different, and I guess that uh, inside that idea is like inherent, let's say, to that idea is, well, the process itself. And I see each piece as being its own thing. I don't see, sometimes there are connections here and there of one piece continuing the idea exposed in another piece, but they are kind of like not really that direct. Like, for example, there was a time where I kind of explored sliced up time, kind of panel forms or moment forms, however you want to describe them, and the perception of time. This I talked a lot about in the lessons with Felder, old T-shirt, like perception of time. We are gonna listen to a bit of that in one of the pieces for guitar. I don't think that you could. No, it was after we graduated. But yeah, for example, on my dissertation piece, which was a piece for guitar quartet, titled Signos Fijos, Signos Mutables, uh, Fixed Signs, Mutable Signs. The main idea was to have the four guitar players surrounding the audience. So that was the main concept, and out of that is where the form kind of came out, even the gestures, even the materials themselves. Let me show you. Give me a second. Show you the guitar formation. So this would be the guitar formation: the first guitar, second guitar, third guitar, and the fourth guitar over here. And that directly impacted the way I wanted to present the music. It was gonna be very sparse at the beginning. Like, I have a video score of that one here. We can see that. Okay, you can listen to a bit of it. Each guitar presenting itself notes on discrete notes, like setting up the space around the audience. So the beginning is a bit like that, right? Where I wanted to show the audience, like, okay, establish the space. So the form, in a way, is basically dictated by the formation that I showed you guys. What I wanted to do with that was move it towards a place where uh, all of them will be playing together. But what will happen? I wanted them to still be distinct, to so that the listener could have this idea um where all of the instruments were still distinct, although it was still a quartet. So it goes on and on. Even the repetitions. This is a nice place that it went here, because even the repetitions, they are designed in a way so that it will go from this will be from left, from right to left, to the back, to the front, right? It's like a ping pong in a way. So the gestures in themselves are manufactured, you might say, are produced in such a way that they want to express the space, the musical space that is established at the beginning. Okay. And you see the piece moving more and more towards that until we have like this climactic point. Also, yeah, the tuplets are distinct because I wanted to create different layers for each instrument. So they have their identity. So the listener could uh, identify them as being distinct characters, you might say, within a play. Uh, I also had this idea of being the sound coming from behind, being an illumination from behind of sorts, you might say. So the fourth guitar, I also imagine it as being very concertante, being the soloist, the main soloist. The hardest parts are written for that guitar. And I'm searching. Yeah, I would say more or less like this would be where everything kind of comes together. Still trying to have some cohesiveness to the material with that gesture. Okay. So there, I hope to have shown how, in a way, the positioning of the players influence the materials, and hence it also influenced the form of the piece, how they were gonna sound, how they were gonna come together. Like each one had its own layers because they were in distinct places. They were not in front of the audience. They were uh, surrounding the audience. I wanted them to have their own personalities. And how to do that in a musical way? Well, it would be creating layers, like triplets, septuplets, quintuplets. Uh, let's say we can put quavers or eight notes, fourth notes, whatever you may want to call them, and triplets, and have them be dispersed around the audience. So that's a way in which I kind of created the form, the main idea for this. And the material kind of goes back also to the beginning. You could see this glissandi and stuff like that that got repeated over and over, and the gestures in the repetition section, the small section I showed you, it kind of is there's something there of that. So that may be a way for me to for my process. Like it goes from concept to musical ideas and how I want to present them. Like the concept was this Gabrieli style. Gabrieli, the composer of the Baroque, where he used different choruses surrounding also surrounding the audience, uh, where you create this surround sound for the player. But here I wanted them to be like really distinct most of the time, and when they come together, they will still retain their singularity and their identity. Okay, so that would be one way, one of my processes, for one piece in particular.
So
You
did
know.
this piece? So I mean, obviously, you started out with the idea of the surround and the placement of the guitars. Then after
Yes.
that, did you then go to like designing material or then creating form?
Um, yeah, it was like first the materials. I wanted to have the fourth guitar. Like I always imagining where the sound was coming from, and I kind of like had these gestures where we have discussed this before, where we kind of give special attention to the gestures in our music, and kind of like the glissandi, like I mentioned, it's a material that keeps kind of coming back throughout the different uh, instruments, throughout the different guitars. So that's kind of a glue, something that glues together the different uh, the different sections. How did I think about form? Well, I was thinking about form in a very discrete way, meaning that um, some transition from one section to the other may be kind of linear, you might describe them, but some of the transition will be harsh. It's like I wanted form to be like at times rough, but at times kind of more more of a transition type of form, if that makes sense. I also thought a lot about the proportions. I wanted this section, for example, that we listen to have some weight to it, like almost like a cadenza type of section. So I kind of like the proportions were very important. Whereas even if in chronometric time, we can we can say that the slow introduction is more or less about the same, like 1 minute and a half as this section. They feel very very different because of the information in them. So the content also was very pertinent when thinking about form, in at least, well, in this piece and in most of my pieces.
You talk about treating the fourth guitar like a soloist in a concerto. Do you say that?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And what about the other three instruments? I mean, do they become some kind of like soloist in some part of the piece?
Not really, because I was very conscious of the visual aspect. You were always gonna be seeing the other three, especially the first guitar. So actually, the first guitar is the one that has less material and that
Mm.
has less impact on the sound, because already because of its privileged position, it was gonna be very visual. It was gonna get most of the attention. No? So that's how I would say that from the concept and the surrounding sounds, like came out the form. It was I was like I was always imagining where the sound was coming from. Um, do you have a follow up for that, Chunting?
Um, I try to remember how it sounds because I believe you sent me the piece when you finish mastering the recording,
Mm-hmm,
and
mm-hmm.
I I have to admit that it sounded much better when I listened. Uh, when I listened back then, perhaps it's because a lot of details are lost
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
here. Yeah,
It
yeah,
might be.
yeah, and because the piece has a lot of, spatial, the spatial arrangement is a crucial factor here, and
Yeah, I think so. I think that a
yeah.
lot is lost when you put it on stereo.
But I could imagine the difficulty of writing such a piece because you are not just thinking about the high or low of those pitches or the density of the pitches or activities. You have to think about how the sound travels in um, in a much wider space, and you need to imagine how the sound, how the directions of the sound may affect the listening experiences.
Yeah, that was always
Do
present.
do you have a like a plan about that? For example, do you think about how how the sound travel in this section, and then how the direction can be changed in the following direction? In the following section, something like that.
I always wanted it to go be pulling backwards towards the fourth guitar, because that's the one that you were gonna pay less attention to. And if you notice, like in the recording, in the video score, it was the one where most activity happened, and the one that had to play the fastest, and the one that had more notes, and the one that was more like virtuosic in a sense, to put it in a way.
The moment you stop the recording, the piece had a lot of like diets, and then
Of what? Sorry.
a lot of doubles. You have like
Okay. Yes.
a lot of. I remember they were thirds, something like that, and then
Mm-hmm.
it's
Mm-hmm.
like one guitar, and then followed by the other, and then followed by another guitar. It sounds like um once a player perform a a passage, and then it is echoed by the other guitarist, and then
Yeah,
it's being
there was
echoed by
that
another.
idea because, in a
Is it the same
sense, I
reality?
kind of, well, not directly influenced by Gabrieli, but more like by electronic music. In a way, for me, how I view music and how I compose music, it comes in a way from electronic music. Although I haven't worked that much with electronic pieces. I did in my youth use a lot of electric guitars with a lot of guitar pedals, and for example, this would be like using a delay, the ping pong delay, pang
Mhm.
pang pang pang, no, something like that, and which is bounce sounding a bit uh, more pianissimo, more piano, decreasing in the loudness, let's say. But those are like foreground materials. But yeah, what you're talking about is very pertinent. How it's kind of like I kind of thought about the whole mass of sound that I wanted to express, and then try to go into the details, to go from the macro to the micro. I usually think like that, but not all the time.
Since you mentioned electronic music, do you try to test your ideas with your computer or whatever software?
Do I try to what?
Do you
To
try to
to
test or experiment your ideas with your computer or software?
Not that much as I would like. Since it's for guitar, I always need a reference, so I play whatever I can, but not in that sense really. I pretty much sit down with the program and kind of imagine what it's gonna be like try and visualize what's the sound, ending sound end product is gonna be. This piece in particular had a lot of that, since it was like visualizing the space. It's space and time. I was trying to convey that through the piece. Kind of very conceptual in the at the beginning, and trying to get it on paper. It was originally like 21 minutes, and I had to cut it down like 20, like 10 minutes or so. It was a much bigger piece, so yeah, it was a lot of work done there.
Why do you have to cut it down?
There was a lot of irrelevant material because of the process itself. Because I was like, okay, I had already done this type of bouncing on this other section, so why do it here if I wasn't
Okay.
gonna recontextualize it in
So
any
it was a
way?
purposeful thing. Like it worked better at this length. It wasn't like someone told you, "Oh, this is too long. You have to cut it in half."
Uh, well, it was the okay. Shanting is gonna be leaving for a bit. See you soon, Shanting. No worries. It was the yeah. In a way, further push towards that, but I also noticed that because there's a live version. I think it's on YouTube. That is the whole version, and I kind
Mhm.
of like realized that some of the sections were too long. There were whole sections that I had to throw out because they were, uh, in terms of narrative, towards the totality of the piece, they were like irrelevant. They ended up being irrelevant.
Mhm.
So yeah,
Was
a
this the
combination
version
of
that
both.
you was this the version that you like submitted as your dissertation, or did you submit the longer
Yes.
version?
No, I submitted this shorter version, which is more compressed, which has more, the ideas are more direct. Like, the thing is, when you're visualizing it and you don't have the whole sound, and I think that you also been through this, Mega, when you experiment with the performers themselves, you have an idea in your head. When you try them and just you lay it all out, it's all laid there. You have a different view. You have a more holistic view, a more total view, totality, a view of the totality of the piece. And yeah, that's how I went about it. And it also was kind of like, I must say, yeah, now that I'm thinking about it, I have thought about this before, but yeah, in the process, it was like editing electronic music, uh, like a tape,
Mhm.
cutting, edit, tune. And some of the forms that I employ are usually like that.
I can see that because I mean I think I could envision this piece and like the material and obviously the way that the sound surrounds you as an electronic piece. Um, very easily. I feel like the some of the types of things that's happening are things that maybe people explore in the electronic realm more so than the acoustic.
It's like probably, and it was mainly during my youth, or when I was like 16, 18, when I used to play a lot of guitar in bands and use a lot of guitar effects like you did for
Uh-huh.
your guitar piece, for example. Oh,
Hmm.
I've been playing a lot lately too, but there was a lot of time that for a long time I didn't play electric guitar. I focused mainly on
Well,
composition. So a lot of that stayed with me, kind of like
yeah.
delays, reverbs, cutting up tapes, editing, uh,
Well, there's also a
recording,
lot of
and stuff like
rhythmic
that.
complexity, which you also hear that level of rhythmic complexity more often in electronic music than you do with acoustic because
That's a pretty
with
good
like
observation,
yeah.
and that kind of that's problematic to get performances sometimes, I think.
Yes and no, but I mean, you have to think that people perform fruity house music all the time.
Yeah, but
And I mean, but I'm just saying that a player who plays that music should then
Mhm.
also be able to play your music.
Yeah, yeah, but I don't know. I think that I'm closer to Ligeti because I studied more. I like more Ligeti than Fernihow. And this layer over
Oh
layer
yeah.
idea, I think that I kind of inherited from him. But also, I kind of saw the electronic influence from Ligeti because when Ligeti became Ligeti, it was after he studied electronic music, even though he never really employed it in his music. So
Mhm.
there's that aspect. Um,
Well, I think Aliggity has a lot of his pieces are very different from one another too.
and what would you say that?
Um, I mean, he has some pieces that are much more like I've played the he has a woodwind quintet, and I've played
Yes,
that several times, and it's a pretty for
I
Liggity.
analyzed that.
It's on the conservative side, I think, for his music.
Yes, yes,
Um, and then he has really conceptual pieces like the 100 metronome piece, like that's on the other way extreme, and then most of his pieces fit in the middle somewhere, but he can kind of I think they all sound like lickety, but there is quite a wide range.
yeah. Is that in the end, even though I say that I try to create something very different, which is each piece, like you cannot separate the piece from yourself. So you are pretty much gonna always be uh, pouring yourself, pouring your feelings, pouring your current situation, your accumulated knowledge into the piece. So it's gonna be, it's always in a way gonna be a reflection, so to speak, of yourself. But so you have to kind of force it to be different from yourself, at least the way I see it, kind of like an architect or an artisan, a craftsman working, on something, or on a building, or a craft or whatever. um so yeah, that would be one way that I think about music. Another one that I would like to talk about is about form, how I see form. Well, because I could speak about the percussion duo, the crossfire duo, and how that one, but it's also in a way very similar because it spread out from the concept. Like they begin very apart. If you see here the setup, let me show. The setup is like, for one of the players, the station two is more um, woody, let's say, more wood sounding. The marimba, log drum, temple block, chime. It's got the chimes here, but they don't enter until very later on. And the other station is got the cymbal, triangle, the vibes, Tibetan prayer balls, crotales, and stuff like that. So it's more like a shiny sound. And how they begin, well, I guess we can listen to a bit of it. At least I can show you. Like, the vibes are here and the log drums are here, so they are like they are very far apart, not only in the station but in the timbric world, in timbre. But what I wanted to do was so the piece will follow along in a way that they will merge together, and it will end up in both of them playing at the same time. The First, they will unite to play the vibes together. One will play on one side with the mallets, and then the other one will play on the other side with the arch. No? So it will be in the same world, but then it will step a bit back and then finish with both of them at the chimes playing together. So in a way that I can show you, but I think that it would be better for the different my different processes, you might say, to show another piece, because this one also goes from the concept towards the materials, right? Um, so this one was a piece for guitar, and And I'm just gonna okay. I'm just gonna play it here. Just go master DJ. Okay, so that's the beginning, and that's kind of pretty standard guitar music, you might say, in a way, or a pretty standard sound. Although it has a ponticello, it's played sur ponticello, whatever. But I kind of wanted to present these two worlds. I wanted to focus on form and how it went from this, uh, from one spectrum of the guitar towards another spectrum of the guitar. So you have this, let's say, and you have this other that's already the harmonics, right? Those are, you can say that those are the two main ideas for this piece, and how it goes between one and another. Yeah, guitar gesture, harmonics, and it's kind of like going from back and forth between one and the other. So what was my intention here? Through the form, I wanted to expose two different time perceptions to the listener, or through the music, uh, through the materials themselves. Like the materials themselves, what would be standard guitar repertoire music, scales, uh, possibly some chords, but then the other type of material would be more static, shiny, harmonic sounds, and how it will go from one to the other, and how the material will step right in between uh, one and the other. How it will change time perception, like going back and forth, fast forward, stop, fast forward, slowing down, and stuff like that. So that would be another way that I conceive about um go about conceiving my pieces, like through form, through a more formal type of view, kind of viewing it in time, in how time is expressed through the materials, let's say. Whereas the other one, it would be more, the other two, it would be more conceptual, and how the performers themselves will express the materials because of the arrangement or the positioning, or because of how there's a duo, and how a duo can merge and then uh, contrast with each other, like how these two personalities can come together and go apart from each other, expressed through timbres, and expressed through the instrument themselves and what they are playing and stuff like that. So yeah, that's another way in which I conceive my materials, and how I conceive form, and how I conceive of the overall narrative, you might say, going back and forth. Like it wasn't like the other ones, you might say. Can the first one, the percussion piece, how it starts, it's very calm. It doesn't try to, the contrast will be between the players themselves. This is Crossfire, the Crossfire piece. And then there's the other one. So they are coexisting. It's not about slicing, going from A to B, A to B, A to B. I wanted this first section to be kind of like feel like an expanded self or so.
Yeah.
But in this dream like manner. So there's a lot of adjectives to my music, and I would say that timbre might be influenced by electronic music. If you, I that's why I gravitated towards that vibe sounds with the
Mhm.
art. But then, yeah,
Have you written any electronic music before or no?
like in 2008, 2009, something like that. Uh,
Okay, yeah,
I,
me too.
yeah, it's kind of like it's awkward. I use the concept, but not haven't really written anything, and I'm not interested in writing electronic music, to be honest.
Yeah, me too.
And how it goes about that, like it's 2 minutes in, and still because it's a like a dream like sequence, you might say. Then the marimba starts. It's kind of like starts introducing more and more contrast, but then suddenly you wake up. Let me see. You see the other instrument becoming more active and more active. It's more gradual, like the changes. How so the forms I try to not recreate the same forms, whereas the other one, uh, uh, the previous one that I showed you, it was more like A B intentionally trying to show two different uh, time passing views of music within the music. It's like it takes a while to get here. First, it goes gradually, but then it kind of goes suddenly. And then they kind of start playing more or less in a contrapuntal manner, more like getting together in timbre, going each their own way. But the thing is, like, uh, here, that's where the both start playing in the vibes in a way, and there's no real contrast here between both, so they it goes from the form kind of gradually goes gradually from being contrasting timbres, um, and this type of dream sequence like music combined with the woods towards more we're here in the dream world for so to speak. And the way it ends, they are both together, right? But before it ends, I wanted them to have a bit of contrast with that. So separated, still wood and shiny sounds separate, but concurrently. And then it will end up with the bells, so to speak, both playing the same gestures. So it's a progression. It's kind of a narrative, so to speak. That's how I see some of my music, how I create some of the forms, whereas the other one, how I showed you, it was more contrasting, A B A B A B. Wanted to kind of go around, like I previously said, two contrasting um, sections of music, to contrasting views of time and stuff like that. So it's about, you might say that it's kind of conceptual in a way. The other one I wanted to show was about it has no sound. I should have probably tried and connect the keyboard, but yeah, you will see. It came out from poetry, so I the this poem in particular was titled under the,
Is this a vocal song?
yes, yes,
Okay.
this is the one that I'm trying to record now, the one that I finished this
Mhm.
year. So it's under the concert of birds, and it's about, well, birds. That's how I visualize it. The thing is that the text directly influence the materials. Like here, you may see like the register of the piano really high up, and how it kind of tries and imitate a bit the sound of birds with uh, adjunct notes and stuff like that. But at the same time, it will begin having these different polyrhythms and stuff, like different birds in a tree singing. I think I sent you a video of nature, of different birds singing at the same
Mhm.
time, right? Well, I got inspiration from that, and though I'm no messian and didn't try to transcribe them, I kind of like wanted it to be expressed in the music, in the piano music, and all of this, well, got translated to the music before it will start to sing. So the materials here are taken from the text itself, you might say, in contrast to the other ones. So I wanted
Mhm.
an imitation of what the text was trying to express. I wanted to translate it into the music, and then put it in music, then to translate it into melodic line, let's say. So yeah, there's some different processes there that I wanted to share with you guys. I don't know what you think about it.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that like all three of us talked about like physical properties of like sound and performance,
Hmm.
and that it seems like you're very much considering like the physical like arrangement of players on stage, and that kind of becomes an inspiration for the ways they interact with each other musically. And
Hmm.
it's yeah, because like I showed the piece of the dancer, and all my music, I'm really interested about movement. And then um, uh, Shang Ting talked a lot about like he when I'm talking about that super slow, subtle crescendo, and how there was it was a physic he was interested in. There was like a physicality about
Hmm.
that, such an extended crescendo for a string player that it was almost like a fatigue and a gesture that small expressed over such like a large number of time. Um, which is yeah, I just interesting. I wonder if it was like if there's like if it's just like a an occurrence that I just noticed, or if it's like some sort of maybe that's the buffalo thing other people notice.
I think that we all are kind of pretty conscious of, one, the gesture, and two, that music is meant to be played on stage.
Mhm.
Like, for example, a lot of people, and even in our generation, they've grown up with music, listening through music through headphones, and they see it as this abstract thing, whereas us, we are kind of always conscious about the performer, about what are the problems that
Mhm.
might arise in interpretation. and out of that, well, you create your pieces your way, right?
Mhm.
You consider even the personalities of the players. I kind of, let's say, the percussion piece, it might reflect how, for example, what the duo is supposed to be. It's supposed to have contrast, but they are supposed to come together at some point, right? It's supposed like
Mhm.
this dance between uh, two persons, two players, let's say. But in the end, it's like they end up in unison, so to speak, in the tonic, you might say. So
Mhm.
there's a rest there or something. Um,
Well,
but
and I think there's it's clear too. I feel like that you understand like the way like sound works, because a lot of times I feel like a lot of composers just think of like notes abstractly and then just like assign them to players or whatever. They want this collection of notes and they just like they're dealing out cards to different musicians. uh, but like the physical construct of like an A is very different depending on what you do with that A. And I think there's
can
also
you
like
reformulate that?
awareness of that. What do you, like? I think there are some people who they might have a set of chords, or a
Hmm.
collection of notes, whether it's tonal or not, and then they have an instrumentation and they just assign notes like one would just deal cards arbitrarily to different performers. But that doesn't take any into account like how that sound is physically produced and like the tension in that sound at that register and that instrument. And I feel like you have like an awareness
It's like having,
of
yeah,
that.
it's like
Yeah.
applying set theory to everything, like not taking into consideration if you are on the lower register or on a
Mhm.
higher register, for example. It's like using the harmony the same way without it, on all the register, without considering the weight that having it on the bass, for example, might have, or
Mhm.
like the thinness of being in the
Yeah.
higher register. Like, for example, here in this piece, well, yeah, even though I'm going from the micro, from the materials towards constructing over that a bigger form, um, well, I can show it in its entirety, but I won't do that since I don't have a recording. But yeah, let's say that what came here first was the gesture, was the sound of the bird. Something like that, you might say. And
Mhm.
how that accumulates over time, and how that you can add to that the polyrhythm, so to speak, but they are all in a this very this register where I think that register is very important towards that, what you are saying, to what you are saying,
Mhm.
like that weight that is added. Um, yeah, how that is kind of like reflective of this the ambience that I'm going for.
Yeah.
Probably we're I think that in a way what you're trying to express is also not only the physicality, but an ambience, a general ambience, instead of
Yeah. I mean,
like
and the
harmony and
physicality
noise.
of the sound itself, and like not just considering
Hmm.
like generic frequency as in the fundamental frequency, but considering the whole sound wave that would be produced by that instrument, and the the transients and the attacks and the different how thin that sound is or how vibrant the sound is. um,
It reminds me of your piece liaison. Were you going for a very reverberary type of sound there? Because kind
mm,
of like the resultant sound
I
is kind of like
don't
very.
know.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I think in that piece, I don't know if I was going for any sound in particular other than a sound that was interesting, because at
Hmm.
first, because I started writing material before I had any sounds really, and it took us a long time to get to the point where we could finally build the technical aspects so that it could produce sound. And
Mm-hmm.
the first sounds weren't very interesting or really sounds, but it was still exciting. It was exciting listening to my sounds. They weren't very interesting to like make a whole piece out of. So we had to keep like fiddling with it and experiment. So it was a lot. That was kind of like a lot of like discovering sounds and then incorporating the sounds that I discover. But it does end up being very reverberant because I had to kind of go out. It could also because the pedals all the way down all the time.
Okay.
And there was that, so that was a physical property. And then because there was only she actually eventually has 5 different pulley systems, and every pulley system can only have a dyad in it, so I
Mm-hmm.
can't have that many different pitches in it, and I can't like transpose the octave, so a lot of it was trying to get different sounds and techniques off of the same dyad by approaching it with at a different angle or at a different firmness. Or sometimes then she started playing, we started realizing, oh well, this contraption makes noise too, and the strings make noise, and we can play the strings, and that's kind of interesting, and
But
they make a whole
that's
different pitch.
going to
You
the
know, it's we
instrument itself. That's kind of like what
yeah.
you were saying. Like I think that there is this misconception, or probably, well, not really a misconception. Some composers are more theoretical than others. You might say more or less what you were trying to express, that they write on paper, and what they write on paper they expect it to sound the same in every concert hall, for example. But I think in that piece, and it's about context. Everything is about context in
Mhm.
the end. It's about how I remember in the seminar, in the graduate seminar, at least once or twice, how it was said that the score itself, it is a fiction. It is a fiction, and it is dead paper if it doesn't get played, right?
Mhm.
Uh, so what we what I try to think, and what I have taken from the other episodes of the compositional process on your processes, is that you're thinking more about the end result, more about how is it gonna come out, not about how well constructed is my piece, uh, how well is the
Mhm.
craftsmanship, for example, how good might it be analyzed in a set theory class, for
Oh
example,
yeah.
or something like that, which is I think that for the composer it's kind of sterile to think that way. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I mean, I try. I mean, I think I really research whatever I'm doing in my piece, and I really know it really well. And I think I'm working with the sounds at a really high detailed level. But yeah, I can't imagine a theory class ever, analyzing it. Nor is that anything that I really desire, you know, to have. Yeah, it's interesting to me, especially with like liaison. People ask about the score all the time, and I have a
is,
score,
is it
but quite
interesting?
the only interesting page I think, and the only useful page is the page of the setup.
Okay.
That's interesting, maybe, and it's useful. I actually use that, but actually the score is written like a long time after the premiere,
Okay.
and
So
quite honestly,
you adapted the sound and kind of transcribed the piece then.
Yeah, Melanie. Oh, I had like a score I scribbled because I'm a composer. Like that's my training, and I have
Hmm.
to work on something on paper. So I had scribbles in a sketchbook that I understood, but it wasn't legible in a way that any performer would be able to, or any other musician. Um, and Melanie has never had a relationship with the score
Hmm. Okay.
at all. She's never been interested in it.
Melanie's the dancer. So just so you guys know.
Yes. And she also she co-authored the piece with me. but yeah, we she has no relationship with the score, and if I'm being truthfully honest, the
Hmm.
score only exists so that I could put it in my portfolio for grad school. Because if I didn't, I literally did nothing else for 2 years. It would have looked like I was sleeping for 2 years and not composing. Um, yeah, which is
But
a
that
silly
piece took a
reason,
lot
but
of work. But yeah,
it took a
for the
lot of work.
same,
But the
for the same.
score, I don't know.
No, but that's the same reason why I kind of focus on the formation, the guitar formation, because I wanted to explain what I was trying to do. I think that the whole, all, all of the score, the video score and stuff that I showed you is more for the musicians to
Hmm.
express our ideas so that they can come
Yeah.
across to the listener. The same with I kind of focus on the setup with the Crossfire Duo piece, and it's well, I have here the last thing I'm gonna show is like I'm working on a piece for large ensemble, and probably
Did
it's
did
uh-huh.
Felder ever talk to you about like he used to talk to me about like maybe exploring like video scores because which seems like I mean
What do you
all the other
mean with video scores?
especially in like the prologue or like the performance notes or the prologues instead
Uh-huh.
of just being like text descriptions, actually having like links in the scores where they could like click on a link and then go to a video of that technique being demonstrated, um,
Mm-hmm.
which makes a lot of sense. But I did it once with a piece I wrote in Buffalo, and it was for just a reading. I don't know if the players ever looked at it. It was a trio, and it was interesting because two of the players played the piece very well, and one of the players played it very poorly. Um, so it was a piece. Was it? It was for cello, flute, and percussion, I think. And I think the percussionist and the flutist were really great, and they're right on the whole time. And then there was this really arbitrary sounds from the cello that had nothing to do with it. Um, but
That's
aside
pretty
the point, but
interesting.
so I don't know if they actually used it or whatever. But you would think that and we studied with David Felder 10 years ago. You think more than that, and you think that in a decade uh, composers would be using more technology
Mm-hmm.
in rendering their pieces standardly anyway, and not that there's no examples of it, um, but it's still usually like, here's my score, good luck, like.
But the thing is, that's what I'm trying to discuss. That in the end, well, at least I write the music so they have the players have a more detailed uh, view of what my intention is. But in the end, and I think that it becomes relevant now that I show a sketch.
Mhm.
In the end, it's something like this. I want it to
Oh
turn
yeah.
this into sound. So how do you go about it, right? Um, this is for large ensemble. It would be like the four
Okay.
groups here: the winds,
So do you
the
have
brass.
specific pitches, or they're just high
No,
low?
they are just high and low and kind of
Mhm.
gestures and accumulation and density. That's what you heard me talk about today. You
So
didn't.
how do you go about finding your pitch language?
Well, I mentioned in the last
You mentioned your
episode
love of
like how I
augmented.
like, yeah, the augmented chord and stuff like that. I go to the keyboard and I think about it in terms of density. I think about it in terms of transparency in octaves, for example, and then adding pitches to have a more dense sound, a more
Mhm.
uh, weight to the sound. um Sometimes it may end up being in this well, I have some tendencies, but I'm not really that
So, because it seemed
specific.
like
Like for
Shunting, like the
example
pitches
here,
came really early on. So for you, the pitches are a late stage, a later stage.
I will say so, at least nowadays,
Yeah.
because at the I didn't show some earlier sketches because when I don't know how to what to do, I do a sketch. I didn't know what to do with this piece, so I kind of visualize the whole, and then I'm going to the specifics. And you kind of see some pictures here and stuff like that. I
Do you have time
okay,
working here at all yet, or is it spatial? The sketch more or
no,
less.
it's a sketch. It's just a sketch. It's like
No,
I
but it
want
is. I
this
guess
is
is time
density.
represented in your. I'm just wondering if time is
Oh,
represented in your sketch.
um,
Like, is it spatial? Like things that take more room on the page would be longer, or not
no,
necessarily?
let's. I wouldn't say so. I wouldn't say. So. I will say that this is the general movement that I want the piece to go on. To go from, yeah. It says bird counterpoint here, for example. I want that texture, for example. I want a texture,
Okay.
or I want a gesture, but I don't want specific pitches. In reality, I kind of like see the whole or the whole phrase, like what's the effect, what's the, yeah, the gesture that it will entail, because in the end it's not like we are counting notes. I That's my point of view. Of course,
Mhm.
it's important to have a harmonic language, and yeah, you kind of go back and see. Okay, I've used this here, so it will make sense to continue with
Mhm.
this over here, or add a second, or add a third, whatever. You know,
Yeah.
uh, but
The way I when I do work with pitches, which is a lot less than you, I kind of work in the same way where I have kind of a lot of contours, and then I go and start adding pitches, and then I kind of look into what I have to develop more. Um, it's different because and last week's
uh huh.
Shang Ting talked about really it seemed like pitch was usually in the original idea.
Yeah, and it probably goes back to what he said about our instruments, but or the music we like. His main instrument is the keyboard, and he's
Mhm.
always teaching keyboard to students and stuff. Um, your main instrument will be the French horn, and it's more
Mhm.
about. You talked about how sometimes it isn't about getting the pitches right. It's more about getting the gesture right, right?
I think it's about I think it's about
Having
to
a
me it's
balance.
about gesture. It's about timbre and like dynamics and articulation. Because if it was about pitch, the instrument wouldn't exist. I mean, it has a big range, but it just
But
doesn't have the level
yeah.
of accuracy or technique that other instruments might. But yeah,
Mhm. But think about the keyboard. The keyboard is kind of pretty static, so you have to focus on the pitches. Now think
yeah.
about the guitar, especially an electric guitar. When you are that was my first love, you will say, and I will say now, looking back on it, that my musical thinking owes a lot to the electric guitar. You can move around with it. You can bend pitches. You sometimes it's more about the grandiosity of the gesture of the chord, how you play it, not
Hmm.
about the pitches themselves. So that's something that I kind of want to express, more like the concertante. Like when I talked about the positioning of the fourth guitar player in the guitar quartet, I kind of imagine him like doing these grandiose gestures where, but I couldn't see him. I could only listen
Hmm.
to these gestures. So I kind of think about music that way. And if you see here, like, okay, there's bird counterpoint, uh,
Hmm.
it might relate to what to the song, to the
Hmm.
beginning of the song that I show you. Is more or less like that. But this is this repeated note on the
And
clarinet
this is for
whatever.
a bigger. This is for the
Yeah,
song. The
no,
okay.
this will be
This is the sketch
a
for that.
larger for a larger
Oh, that's the
ans-
larger ensemble. Okay.
yeah.
I just was
And
because
here,
there seems to be the bird idea in both of them.
yeah, I'm thinking about birds a lot lately. But the thing is, like you see here it is about the register. Where do I
Uh-huh.
the limits of the register? Where do I want the limits of the register? And then there's where specific notes may come into play. Like, okay, the limit of the register will be C4, let's say, from
Mhm.
C4 to C6 or something like that. Or this section, I want to focus on C4 to G4, something like that. But it's more about expressing the register, expressing a specific register than the harmonies or
Yeah.
sometimes
I
sonorities and stuff like that. And you see kind of like density here. It gets more dense than less dense. That's pretty much
yeah.
the idea for the form, but at the same time, you have the strings doing the pitches and kind of accumulating on the pitches at different uh, heights,
That's
you
it.
might
Yeah.
say. So
I
it's kind
think
of
the
like,
thing that I'm most surprised that's not in this score, just based on what you showed me in the final score, and also other pieces. I see some weird things. Is that there isn't
mhm,
a lot of rhythmic information, and your
no.
pieces are very rhythmical and very complex rhythmically. How does the rhythm come about then?
Hmm. Yeah, it's a very foreground thing. I think about rhythm like it's like materials. Okay, I think about quintuplet against 5 against 4. Okay, I'm gonna use that idea and use it repeatedly here or there, or using septuplets or 7 and 6, 7 6, 7 6, stuff like that. It's I think
Mhm.
about rhythm like layers. Because rhythm, now that you mention it, is more important than pitch for me. Is way more important. It gives more for me. It gives a gesture has more identity because of its rhythm than because of the pitches. Uh,
Yeah, and
the
I
rhythm,
think the player, like you say, the player, you have a hard time finding players that feel confident playing your music, and I would say that the rhythm is probably the hardest aspect.
yeah, yeah. I think that I have to agree with you there. But and that's been, now that I think about it, something that I've had since the first pieces where I was copying expressionism and copying, imitating, I would say, and impressionism and stuff like that that weren't really in my language that I wouldn't show nowadays to anybody, probably. But yeah, now that you
I
say so,
wonder,
yeah.
like, I wonder if there's like, I don't know, easier ways to notate the general ideas. Um, I mean, we see like, I don't know if this is quite the answer, but like Lutoslawski, with his indeterminate work, where he has rhythms and pitches, but like their alignment, when he wants really a lot of density, he just lets them kind of go, and their alignment is not specified, and the result is a sound that it sound. I mean, if we analyze it, it's not the same, but it sounds just as much the same as
Yeah,
any other piece would at a certain time. He's controlling the sound.
I will say that
And for the
yeah.
complexity, I played a piece, like I remember I played a piece of Lutoslawski, an orchestra piece of his, and the orchestra was not a very good orchestra, I would say.
Hmm.
Um, and the orchestra sounded really way more impressive and way more like they were capable of way more complexity than they really were. They could pull those off uh, pretty easily.
I should consider doing that in my music probably. But is that at the same time it depends on how many instruments you have, because you're talking about an
Yeah,
orchestra piece, especially
yeah.
what comes to mind when I hear the term
Well,
uh,
you're
is
working on a large ensemble
con-
piece right now, so
so that might work. Yeah, controlling determinacy is, I think, is the term.
yeah,
Was it like that? Uh,
yeah,
Something like that. Something, but
yeah.
from Witold Lutoslawski.
Sometimes aleatory, I've heard it.
Control aleatorism sometimes.
But yeah, I usually go to the name like more like a controlled indeterminacy is what the term my head goes to. Um,
Determinate aleatorism or control
there,
aleatorism is it's got many names, but
there's
yeah,
a
for
couple
the
times
effect,
too when you were flipping through the scores that sometimes I want, like, a lot of times the beats are obscured, and sometimes there's not really a better way to notate it to show the beats, but a couple times I felt like there was a way to like break up the rhythms and use ties, and that could be make it a little bit easier, but it doesn't really solve every measure's difficulty. Not that difficulty being difficult is a problem, but obviously we want to try to optimize the amount of,
you
the
want to get
quality
your
of music
and
that we get
y-
out of the performers.
yeah, and you want to get your music played too, right? But when I think
Yeah.
about indeterminate or determinate aleatorism, I think about his Symphony Number 3 is the first thing that comes to mind. With smaller ensembles, I think that the rhythm is really with like specific rhythms. It gives the gestures identity. Uh, it's the way I see it. But at the same time,
Mhm.
well, for example, yeah,
Mhm.
in the first periods we listened to the guitar quartet, I might have gotten the same effect without being so specific, right? Because it
Mhm.
was about layers. But at the same time, since they were discrete guitars, one behind, one to the left, one to the right, one in front of you, so they did get some identity from that. So, yeah, rhythm is
I,
a topic that we should speak about more. I think
yeah.
it's really
Um,
because yeah, so, some people will think rhythm. Well, rhythm is like something like for Caribbean music or whatever for dance music, but rhythm is in everything, and rhythm is very
mhm.
very important. I would say, like even if it's a long sound, it's got its own rhythm, and if it's a long sound, how Stockhausen used to say, then on a bass, then it forms its own rhythm because of its vibration and stuff like that. But
Sometimes I know I also have the experience of like I kind of realize what aspects of music are more important to me and less important to me by
yeah,
by
which
the
one would you
things that
say?
when players play my music and by their mistakes and by which mistakes bother me and which mistakes don't bother me. Um,
Mm-hmm.
that I kind of realize that um yeah, I realized a lot of that. Like I remember the piece I used to write when I was in high school music that was very dense, very polyphonic, very like
Mm-hmm.
more is more kind of music. And I was really interested in the gestures. And if they didn't play the sense of gestures, then that would
Get
bother
mad.
me.
Okay.
But if they missed a pitch in a large gesture, if it was like if I still got the contour, if it was like
Yeah,
they played
exactly. That's what I
A
was
flat,
trying.
that that wasn't a huge. That wouldn't be like wouldn't be a huge deal to me. Um, Sometimes rhythm, if the alignments and like the way the order of the notes between the players mattered to me, but if they were like a little lazy about like a triplet versus a 16th note, like in
Mm-hmm.
my
Hmm.
music, that wouldn't necessarily that wasn't bothering me. So I like sometimes I that was kind of like a starting point for me is being like, okay, well, this is the things that I really care about because when they miss this, I don't care about. So how do I like hone in on that? Um, and maybe allow even more flexibility on some of the other stuff because I did have really hard I had especially really hard pitches and like technical passages that was making my music really hard, but then I didn't necessarily care if they got it right. So
Mm-hmm.
that was kind of problematic because it'd be one thing if it was like that was really essential to the
Mm-hmm.
music
Hmm.
to get all these notes. So then I started experimenting. I mean, I don't always work this way anymore, but like I started experimenting with much more gestural, like um, where the gestural, like where players would play like high, middle, low. Uh,
I think that it also well, it definitely comes down to aesthetics, how you
Oh
view your
yeah.
music, what are you looking for in music. For example, I really value ruptures. I really value slice up gestures, like this robotic type of stuff. And for that to
Mhm.
come better through, I think that you need to have a good sense of rhythm. Because if
Mhm.
your reading rhythm display is sloppy, then that doesn't come out through. And if that doesn't come out through, then your intention, my intention at least as a composer, doesn't come through, and that will bother me more than it will bother you.
I love like now at my age, I would have never believed that would have been a big interest of mine as a teenager. Uh, I love writing just really steady pulses.
Yeah,
Um,
like
I love it because
Marshall, like dun, dun.
March like, but then I put enough physical parameters on it that the pulse breaks down because
Mhm.
like we're always like wanting music to sound like unpredictable, whatever. But then after a while, if you like think of music that is really like just unpredictable, it doesn't really sound that like at every second. It doesn't sound. It just sounds like a bunch of sounds, and then you begin to expect the unpredictable. And it's like you can't be irregular if you're not if there's no regularity in the music at some point too. You know, I don't know.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's why I, even though one of the pieces is called temporal modulations, I don't use metric
Mhm,
modulation that much. There's still this sense of pulse, I will say,
mhm,
in throughout the music. But then that kind of sense of pulse is kind of um, rhythm sometimes devalues it, you might say, or puts it in the background or whatever. But you can sometimes, many times, I would say, you can listen how it goes to a downbeat. You can listen to the downbeats. I
mhm,
worry more than pulses than regular or periodic pulses. I would say I worry more about the downbeats, how it
mhm.
goes into a downbeat and stuff. Um, Not in that percussion piece that I was talking about, the dreamlike stuff and all of that. It depends, right? But the
Mhm.
downbeat, I think that is something that a lot of contemporary or new music have lost, and it's not bad. It's not bad to have a downbeat here, like
Mhm.
a regular downbeat or a periodic downbeat, like
Yeah.
you
You also
use.
don't, but you don't have a regular meter either. It looks like you change meters fairly frequently.
That's why, because I want the
Yeah.
downbeat to get noticed, or at least I have the downbeat in my head. I don't know if it comes out
Yeah.
through. That's
No, I
another
think it's just
thing.
another strategy because I think some composers just write in 4/4
For
as
four,
like a
yes,
default, but it's just like a way to fill out pages that the meter doesn't mean anything.
no, no. For me,
I don't write
definitely.
like that necessarily either, but but I know a lot. There's a lot of contemporary composers that would.
Uh, I was, yeah. We can talk about what are the cliches of contemporary music at some point, because I want to analyze those. I've been thinking about those, and I want to escape those. And I think we all falling into those here and there. So, but as one gets more mature or older, let's just say, one starts thinking more about what one doesn't want in one's music, not only what
Yeah.
one wants. I will
I
say,
also
and
I
yeah,
also wonder if your larger ensemble piece will benefit just from the fact that it will likely be conducted, and
um, it will
that
likely
you'll
it will.
those it will likely have a conductor if it was reformed, and the conductor would
Okay,
conduct.
yes,
So
yes.
it might make it rhythmically a little bit easier. That especially because you do pay attention to downbeats and
But I think that I will have to tone down the rhythmic language for larger ensembles, right? Don't you think?
most people have to. Yeah,
Yeah,
most people have to just tone down in general, just
but a
because of
way
the
out of that,
infrastructure.
yeah, yeah, it's like larger ensemble. That's why I would love to see an orchestra or a large ensemble piece from you, but I don't think I'll ever get to hear one. I don't know why. I get this sense.
You know,
I don't.
I mean, if
I
there is
don't
that
think you're
perfect
ever
opportunity,
interested. You
I'm
would,
not interested to like seek one out. But if you know,
if it
if an
comes your
orchestra
way.
came to me and was like, oh hey, I mean, I can't imagine an orchestra. I mean, I have a hard time getting like one or two players that are like not scared to death to play one
Scared
of
to
my pieces. Like I
I
don't know.
like the way you say it.
I feel like they get pretty intimidated. Um,
Yes,
yeah, they get intimidated because I asked them to be authentic on stage, and no one likes to be authentic
but I think
ever,
that is
really.
a thing of compromise. Like the guitar piece, I listen the electric guitar piece I listen from you.
Hmm.
It seemed the performer was pretty um uh, compromised, pretty into it, pretty
Hmm.
um. Oh, the word escapes me right now. He was not compromised. Oh my god. Uh, committed. Oh my god.
Yeah,
I mean,
Jesse
he was
Landon
pretty
is great.
committed. Like, and that's what you're looking for.
Yeah,
Committed
he's
performers for
he's
your
committed
music,
to
and that's more
everything I do,
important.
and he was already interested in what I was doing, and like kind of and he asked for the piece, which is not a scenario that happens all the time. But
And it shows. It really
I
shows.
do have some really good relationships with some very adventurous players, and I think the players that go in with that mindset, I think they always have a good experience with it. Like they're always, it might be hard, but they always seem to enjoy the process of being kind of in this
So
place, you know, because
you
it
can
is
also
like
talk
when
about this, like how you, well, or at least mention it, like how committed is a player. It also kind of changes the process in a way, like because
yeah,
it's more of a personal piece. It's more of a dialogue between two people, and the score is just kind of like some notes. It becomes some notes that you transmit and you want to communicate.
yeah. I mean,
Like
and
that piece.
I've had the issue. I imagine you might have too, where uh, I have an idea. I might have a piece, a couple of players that want me to write them a piece, and a lot of times I know those players, and sometimes I'm very good at kind of matching those players' personalities with what I want with what I do with them. And
Mhm,
sometimes I just there's something I really want to do and it really doesn't match the personality. Um,
mhm.
and sometimes I think I'm getting better, but like sometimes I've just gone for it anyway.
You
Um,
kind of have
and
to be a psychologist
it's
in a
never been
way.
very successful. I had one piece that I wrote um, it was for a duo in ice,
Mhm,
and it was a flute and saxophone duo. Um, I knew one of the players I knew really well, and I had worked with them before, and I I wrote what I wanted to write, and I didn't do a good job thinking of the piece, and I ended up like 2 days before the premiere, pretty much
mhm.
having to pull all nighters and completely rewrite the piece.
Oh,
And
that's awful.
it ended
Yeah.
up becoming successful. I mean,
Mhm.
in its own right, it was just like a little. It wasn't a huge piece. It was a smaller piece that was more lighthearted, but it just wasn't gonna be. It wasn't gonna come off um, the way I had it with the players that I had specifically written it for.
Mhm.
And it was my fault because I should have known because I knew the players. Um,
Well,
and you know, I went back and I did revise it and it did work well with the it did communicate with the revisions, but yeah.
Yeah.
And you talk about revising your pieces when you're working with players too.
Well, it's a back and forth, and that percussion duo. It was if you don't know the instruments, or if you don't know uh, the idiosyncrasies of the player, so the limitations of the players. Sometimes they are not at the highest level, or they have their strengths and weaknesses like every other player. So, uh, but yeah, going back and forth is also a part of the process. Going the practical route, always you have to. Uh, I think that being practical, being pragmatic is definitely another aspect that we didn't speak so much about. Like going back and forth, the revision process. The revision process in
Yeah.
itself is part of the revisions are part of the process. Of course, you have to learn when to let a piece go. You cannot be revising until you are 70 years old, like Pierre Boulez did, for example. I will say.
Yeah.
I would say, but
I mean,
um,
I think Shunting talked a little bit about that in last week's. That I think I had kind of a similar view as him, that like that we're constantly editing the piece as we're writing it, but at a certain point, it's just like it's done. I definitely
yeah,
don't have a David Felder approach where he's like spending years and years and years obsessively editing the same works. Um,
and once it gets recorded, it's like it's hard to. Yeah, I don't know. It seems awkward to revise it once uh, it
yeah,
gets
but we
immortalized or whatever. Or well, you can get a first performance or so, and then revise it for a second performance. But to go to it after each performance and stuff, it's awkward. It's because it shows a specific moment in your life, a specific aspect of you
oh
as an
yeah.
artist. Like you were there during this year of your life, during this uh, year as a composer, and this is
Mhm.
what you were thinking about, how you were thinking about music, and all of
Oh
that.
yeah. I have older pieces of mine that I still really love,
Yes,
and maybe I think I did some things I did well, but probably some things I would have a lot more knowledge to do better now. But like I love it because what it represented and that part of my life. It's like it's for me. It's almost like reading like a journal or something of
yes,
of a time in my
definitely.
life that yeah.
Uh, I and well, I don't usually go back to pieces to analyze them. I think you do sometimes.
Um, sometimes if I'm in a situation where I have to uh, talk about the piece, I will. Like if I have players that are interested in the piece and I'm coaching them, or if
Mhm.
I'm asked to present on a piece, that's all. I will usually go back and refresh my mind on the piece.
Oh,
Uh,
okay, okay. But
that's yeah.
not to write new pieces, not analyzing your past style to in order to go ahead
No,
with
I
them.
mean,
No.
I do think in the last couple years, my music has gesture has had a much stronger role
Mm-hmm.
in my music, and my music was super gestural. Really, really up until I started at Buffalo. Um,
But
and it became much more
yeah,
about these like big processes. I think a lot of the music I wrote in Buffalo than the
yeah,
actual like
I will have to
gestures,
agree.
physical, and I don't know. I had a hard time using the gestures because the gestures were so arbitrary, and that was bothering me. Like they were just something I was choosing, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but we all make arbitrary choices, or you know that's based on something we like or whatever. Um, but that was really bothering me. Like I didn't like that. Like why would I pick for this note to be a 1 second if it could be 10 seconds or it could be 10 million seconds, you know, like I kept thinking about that and it was like bothering me. So I tried to find processes in which like all those questions were answered in my head. And now I'm
You're
I just
going
don't
back to
feel
the
like I
gesture.
need. Yeah, now I still I think I have a combination of the two. Like I do like some of these processes and some things that happen with these processes, but I have a lot more gestures. I just think I like the expression of the gestures. I like the lightheartedness. I like the personality of gestures. I even though they maybe are arbitrary because I have to choose what to write and write them. Um,
Mm-hmm,
I
mm-hmm.
yeah, it so I but I don't think I went back and like looked at my older gestural music to like find new gestures to write for pieces. It's just that yeah, I came back to that idea. I think they were always inside me. I think I just was a little bit intimidated to use them for a while. That maybe it wasn't serious enough to have music that was gestural based, especially when my music often didn't have a lot of pitches or complex rhythms or other things that people think are as lofty.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I was in
Hmm.
a PhD program.
Well,
So,
but we were in a very eclectic PhD program, and
yeah.
well, I think that that kind of like is a good place to end our discussion there.
Yeah.
We've been here for an hour and a half now,
I
but
know.
yeah, I think that yeah, what would you say about musical processes, about these last three discussions we've had? I would
I
say
mean, I
that
think
yeah.
I think we all had like I think it was really interesting because I think we all had very different processes, but also like I felt like personally like a connection to like both of you at certain points too. Um, so like that was kind of interesting, especially because I think our resulting music, all three of us have very different sounds. So it's kind of interesting that sometimes there are similarities, but then there also are um, a lot of differences in that as well. So I thought that was interesting.
I think I yeah, adding to what you have to say, that even though uh, we all came from the same school, we all think about music in our own, like we can trace how we think about music to our youth in a way, but at the same time we've
Mhm.
kind of picked up on many these different aspects and kind of make our processes more eclectic, more diverse in a way. Like we can talk about our process now, but we can talk about our process 5 years ago or 10 years ago when we were
Mhm.
students and stuff like that. And but there's still a connecting thread. There's still that, even though I say that I want to create different musical objects, musical pieces that sound very different, there's still something of my identity
Oh yeah.
that you could come, that you identify, like rhythm. And I was like, yeah. And then like, okay, that's been there from since the beginning. And then I started
Uh-huh.
thinking like electronic music was very important as a process, as a thinking process. So it's like sometimes in our processes, and probably this is applies to all artists, there are many things that we are not very conscious about, but we kind of like, that's that was a good exercise that we were doing
Mhm.
here. Why? Because we were turning the unconscious into conscious in many aspects,
Mhm.
and see and comparing with each other and analyzing our own music. I think that we all got something out of this discussion,
Yeah.
I
And
would
I
say.
mean, I think when I teach composition, I teach very beginning composers that are usually like middle school, high schoolers
Hmm.
that are often new to composition. Um, I think one of the most like a lot of them like experience a lot of writer's block. Um,
Hmm.
and writer's block really is just um, kind of it's just a fear of not being good enough expressed on page. Um,
Yes, the blank page.
that's what it really is. And I think sometimes it's just like I tell them just write something and make it be bad, like or anything. Like it just because it's like if you get something on the page, it's
You
much
can
easier
edit it.
to
Yes.
yeah, you can edit. It's much easier to work with something than nothing. And sometimes the act of just getting something on the page, even if it's very bad, like makes it easier for then we're delving into sound and then to maybe have a better idea. Um, I yeah, I think the for me like the I try to allow my students to have their own processes, but like to be active and engaged. Like being stuck in writer's block is like the worst
We've
way
all
to
been
work, and I
there.
don't know if yeah. But I also don't think it's I don't think writer's block is a thing. Like I think it is a thing, but it's not like a thing like I literally can't think of anything to write. It's that
It's a
we're
fear.
being
It's
too
like you said,
critical and
you
fear. Yeah.
describe it pretty good in a pretty good manner. It's a fear, but it's a fear of doing it wrong. But that has to do with the process because once you have the experience of going through different processes of using this process or this process, probably that's I'm fighting writer's block, trying to go about different processes with each piece. Probably, who knows?
Mhm.
Because that way, if you have more modus operandi on your wing, you can fight that you can view music, okay, I can do this or I can do this or I can do this, and as you become more experienced, then you kind of become a better judge of what to do, of what you want to do,
Yeah.
and of your intentionality coming through, because there's no really any right or wrong way of doing it. It's about intentionality in the end, I will say.
Hmm.
And that's what all I have to say.
Yeah.
Do you have
Yeah.
anything else?
No, I mean, I think if anything, like learning more about like both of your processes made me like want to go back and listen to like pieces of yours again and of shunting too. So that's cool because sometimes that's not always the case. I think we've definitely had seminar judges that or people who come to the seminar guests that have presented, and I'm like, wow, like I think I might like the music less now. I
Ouch.
that is how I felt about I it was at Northwestern. Probably an unpopular opinion because a very famous composer, Kaja Siriaho.
Uh-huh.
Beautiful. Her music is beautiful. I the way she doesn't really have anything to say about her music though. Like
I
when you
think you
at
you
least she
told me
didn't.
this at one point.
She was
Yeah.
so like dull about it and really had like one word blank answers every question. And I when she talked about her music, I'm like, wow, like that makes me like her music less, I feel like, because she just made it seem more boring than it really sounds.
But
Um,
but if you go back and listen to her catalog, like her music didn't change much throughout the decades.
mm-mm,
Like
it didn't.
I don't think that I think that she found her process and stuck with it. And
Yeah,
you're
but she didn't really want to talk about it either. She just I don't know. Which was fine. But then she was at like a she was accepting a lifetime achievement award that included a lot of teaching. So that was a hard position to be in for somebody who doesn't want to talk and present their music. So
probably that's why I haven't listened to her in a while. I don't know, it kind of got old. Anyway,
yeah,
it
yeah,
yeah, I think we should listen to each other's music a bit more. And well, I think that we
I
know
think so
each
too.
other, that we know more about each other now. Anyway,
Yeah.
I think that we
Well,
should.
some pieces, especially of yours, like I haven't heard some of the pieces in like like the Crossfires. It
Yeah,
comes back, but it's like it's been like probably a while,
and that was a Union Buffalo piece. That
Yeah,
I don't know. It's
I
kind of like
remember it, but it's
it. No, the thing is that it's connected to the festival, so it's got an emotional touch to it in a way. So because
yeah.
it
So
was premiered at a very special at City Hall and all of that, and it's kind of like it's got all of this
that's cool.
emotional
Oh yeah,
baggage for well,
it's a big deal. Yeah.
just yeah. And Bobby and Jason were playing it too, so yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, we should leave it
Yeah.
here probably. Be
Sounds
safe.
good.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.